Hey guys! Trying a Hinata-centric story this time. This is what if Hinata had Neji's personality. What if Hinata hadn't been sweet? What if she had been very much like Neji? A cold, prodigious, and astute Kunoichi with little regard for the untalented? Oh, how different things could have been. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 1, Selection. Naruto yawned as he walked into the classroom. He had overslept due to an alarm clock malfunction, and lateness was the absolute last thing he needed. He had been given the title of genin through highly unusual and controversial means, and being late spit in the face of the man who had made the promotion a reality. How is it that I'm still exhausted even though I overslept? Naruto wondered to himself as he sat down in one of the few open seats available in the room. After several minutes of waiting, Irika, who was the academy instructor, cleared his throat and gave the group of children a hard stare in order to gain their attention and silence them. Now that everybody is here, we can get started with team assignments. Before we do that, you should all know what exactly is going to change about your lives now that you're ninja of the Hidden Leaf Village, he began. A murmur rippled through the new batch of genin as they pondered the meaning behind their now former teacher's words. First of all, you will be expected to take complete and total responsibility for anything and everything you do from here on out. Despite your ages, you're effectively working-class citizens now. Meaning that you will bear the expectations of an adult. You will still be given more leeway than, say, a chunin, but punishments will not be withheld simply because you're children. Secondly, you will now be more or less in charge of your own income. Many of you have parents that can and will assist you with such things, but they still have no real control over what you do with the money you earn, he continued. The class all made a sound of approval at the explanation of their newfound economic freedom. Irika sighed inwardly as he watched them react. Lastly, at some point during your career as a ninja, and almost certainly more than once, you will be forced to murder. You will have blood on your hands whether you want to or not. Depressing as it is, that's the long and short of it. Now, on to cell assignments, he concluded. The jovial mood that had permeated the classroom vanished at the final section of Irika's speech and was replaced with a melancholy silence. One by one, Irika listed of teams. After 6 uninteresting cells, Team 7 was announced. Team 7 will consist of Naruto Uzumaki, Irika said. The blonde glanced up from his desk and awaited the identities of his 2 teammates. Shikamaru Nara, the instructor, continued. Naruto felt his spirits heighten slightly. He had never known the lazy Nara well, but he had never been outwardly unpleasant as many of the Uzumaki's classmates had been. And Hinata Hyuga. Your Jonin instructor will be Kakashi Hatake, Irika concluded. Naruto glanced up to the far left corner of the room where the Hyuga heiress was sitting. Her posture was perfect, her clothes were ironed and clean, her eyes were sharp and attentive, and while her appearance was certainly an acquired taste, she was undeniably attractive. A true symbol of the high standards set by her family, the illustrious Hyuga clan. I just had to end up with the other rich kid, didn't I? Naruto grumbled within his mind. Irika went on to announce the remaining cells, with the notable ones being teams 10 and 8, consisted of Choji, Ino, and Kiba, and Sasuke, Shino, and Sakura respectively. At least I don't have to deal with Sasuke. I did miss out on Sakura-chan, though the Uzumaki thought with mixed feelings. After the assignments were complete, the classroom began to empty, leaving nobody but Team 7, who had been ordered to remain in the room by Irika in order to await the arrival of Kakashi. So, what do you think of this whole ninja thing? Naruto asked Shikamaru, who was staring out the window as he always did. The young Nara glanced at the blonde out of the corner of his eyes and sighed. It sounds like a hell of a lot of work. Kind of a drag if you ask me, he replied in standard fashion. The Uzumaki chuckled and looked to Hinata, who was reading a book. What about you? He asked. The heiress closed her book and stared down at Naruto, a look of subtle disdain in her pale, assessing eyes. I consider ninjahood to be a great honor. An opportunity to uphold my clan's reputation, if you will. Although, the circumstances and environment in which I will be forced to accomplish that goal aren't exactly ideal, she said, never blinking as she stared at the blonde. Shikamaru made a noise of protest, easily deciphering the meaning of statement. Naruto furrowed his eyebrows and frowned. What's that supposed to mean? He asked. Shikamaru opened his mouth to explain, but stopped when somebody walked into the classroom. Team 7 looked to the door of the room, where a man with silver hair and a covered eye stood. So, I guess you 3 are going to be my team. Nara, Hyuga, and whoever the hell Blondie is. Works for me. Come to the roof. We're going to run through some introductions, he said, vanishing in a puff of smoke once he had finished his final sentence. The genin all stood up from their seats and walked out of the classroom. Naruto studied his teammates as he walked alongside them. Shikamaru slouched as he walked, and yawned almost periodically. He was the polar opposite of Hinata, who stood up straight and took measured, efficient steps. Her movements were clearly rehearsed and well-groomed. Naruto had never spoken a word to Hinata, the brief exchange of words in the classroom having been their first conversation, but he knew one thing for sure despite their limited interactions. He disliked her strongly. Kakashi flipped through the pages of his orange-colored book as he awaited the arrival of his genin. It had been roughly 3 minutes, and they had not made it to the roof. I really need to show them how to use Shunshin sometime, he thought to himself. Then, as if his silent prayers were being answered, the group of genin arrived on the roof, all of them looking quite bored and tired. Kakashi shut his book and set it aside. Now that you're all here, let's get down to what I called you all up here for. Each of us is going to say our name, the things we like, the things we dislike, your goals, that kind of thing, he explained. The group gave a collective nod. The jonin looked to Shikamaru. Start us off, Nara, he said. The lazy genin sighed and rubbed his eyes as he gathered his thoughts. My name is Shikamaru Nara, and I like shogi, clouds, naps, and not much else. I dislike tests, exercise, and waking up early. My goal is to have an average wife, maybe a 7 out of 10 or so, 2 kids, a passable, but not overly impressive income, and I want to die at the age of 80, he explained tiredly. Kakashi scratched the back of his head and chuckled. Don't be too ambitious, kid. You might disappoint yourself, he said humorously. He then pointed to Naruto. You next, Blondie, he said. The Uzumaki nodded and sat up a bit straighter as he prepared his improvised speech. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, and I like ramen, weekends, and training. I dislike waiting for my food, stuck-up pricks, and just bullies in general. My goal is to be Hokage. That way, you people will have to respect me, whether you want to or not, he explained. Kakashi nodded and smiled behind his mask as he reminisced about an old friend. He then motioned to Hinata, who was patiently awaiting her time to speak. Your turn, Hyuga, he said. The heiress stretched and eyed every person on the roof, seemingly to make sure they were all listening. My name is Hinata Hyuga, and I like things such as gardening, quiet nights, and dango, on occasion. I dislike spicy food, simpletons, and inefficient taijutsu. My goal is to lead my clan as I see fit, she said, glancing at Naruto at the word simpleton. What about you? Naruto asked the jonin. Kakashi sighed and slapped Shikamaru on the back of the head to wake him from a nap he had decided to take. My name is Kakashi Hataki. I like some things, and dislike others. As for my goals, I guess I've never really thought about it. I'm more of now kind of guy, he said. The Uzumaki frowned and pointed an accusing finger at the silver-haired ninja. That's not fair. You didn't tell us anything about you other than your name, he said. Kakashi shrugged and stood up. Unlike you, I have no obligation to tell you anything. I'm the authority. You're all free for the rest of the day, by the way. Be at the training grounds at 7 sharp tomorrow. The second phase of your genin exam will take place there. Don't eat tomorrow morning either. You'll just end up puking, he said before vanishing as he had in the classroom. I'm going home. See you guys tomorrow, Shikamaru said immediately after the jonin had disappeared. He then made his way down from the roof and down to the streets, beginning his trek home. Naruto glanced at Hinata, who was wearing a look of irritation. What's got you so bothered? He asked. The heiress glanced at him, and then looked in the direction Shikamaru had walked. Both our sensei and our teammate are lazy fools. Then there's you, an outcast and easily the worst student in our academy's history, only rivaled by Choji Akimichi. To say that I'm displeased with myself would be an understatement, she said. The blonde prickled at her words. Cry me a river, princess. I get that you're from the most famous clan in the village, but that doesn't make you any better than we are, he said defiantly. Hinata scoffed, and turned to leave the roof. Oh, I think you'll find that a chasm exists between you and I. Social classes exist for a reason, Uzumaki-san, and you and I are of different levels, she said. Naruto growled as she made her way down the stairs and into the building once more. You aren't better than me. I'll show you. Kakashi knocked on the door of Hiruzen's office and waited. After several moments of silence, a call of confirmation could be heard from within the room, prompting the jonin to enter. Once inside, he closed the door and sighed, earning an eyebrow raise from the elderly Kage. You look exhausted. I know that you dislike genin for the most part, but they don't usually tire you out, the Hokage said somewhat humorously. Kakashi sighed and sat himself down on a chair in front of the old man's desk. What on earth was your thought process when putting the cells together? My team has no chemistry, he asked. Hiruzen thought back to the many nights he spent meticulously planning the arrangements of the genin teams. They do have chemistry, it will certainly take some time for it to become tangible, but it does exist, he replied. The silver-haired ninja snorted. Naruto is, for lack of a better word, a dunce. Shikamaru is about as driven as a middle-aged alcoholic, and Hinata is about as hyuga as you can get. That is not a compatible group of personalities. I don't care what you say, Hokage-sama, he countered tiredly. The old man gave Kakashi a hard stare. This team isn't entirely dissimilar from Team Minato, if you think about it. Rin was, unlike Shikamaru, very driven, but you weren't all too different from Hinata in your younger days, and the similarities between Obito and Naruto are numerous and uncanny. The only real difference between your cell and this one is that you're taking on Minato's role, he said. The Jonin opened his mouth to respond, but shut it when he found that he had nothing more to say. He then stood up from his chair and turned to exit the room. Either way, I doubt they'll pass the test. The biggest difference between my team and this one is that I'm a harsher teacher than Minato-sensei ever was. Chapter 2, Bells. Hinata suppressed a yawn as she waited patiently in the training field Kakashi had ordered them to attend. It was 6:58 a.m., and neither of her teammates nor her sensei had arrived. Yet another reason that her placement was nonsensical. No sense of punctuality could be found within the psyches of her comrades. You're out early. Not all that surprising, I guess. The Hyuga heiress glanced over her shoulder and spotted Naruto making his way into the training ground, a tired look on his face. Hinata glanced at her pocket watch. 7 o'clock sharp. Just as he was instructed. So you are capable of following directions, Uzumaki-san, she thought to herself. The blonde walked over to the girl and sat down 5 feet from her. Why'd he have to make us come out here so early? Wouldn't 8 o'clock have been better? That way we wouldn't be half asleep for this testing, he complained through a yawn. The Hyuga girl sighed inwardly. And of course, he complains. No work ethic whatsoever, she thought frustratedly. She then began counting in her head the number of seconds her remaining cohorts were late. Eventually, Shikamaru meandered his way into the field, looking even more exhausted than Naruto as he did so. 178 seconds. I expected something closer to 300. Not bad, Nara-sen, she thought to herself. After 10 more minutes, she gave up on counting for Kakashi. Okay, this is just stupid. He tells us to show up at 7 sharp, and he's not here yet. 7 o'clock was 10 minutes ago, Naruto grumbled. Hinata, for the first time since Team 7's formation, agreed with the excitable genin. You would think that a jonin would be, at the very least, capable of being on time. I suppose that we set out expectations a bit too high, she said. Shikamaru then laid down on the grass and closed his eyes. Well, since it seems like we have some time to kill, I'm gonna take a nap. Wake me when he gets here, he said. Before anybody Naruto or Hinata could respond, the shadow user began to snore. Maybe I should do that too. Seems like a good idea, the blonde said as he too began to lay down on the grass. Hinata shook her head. I would prefer if you didn't, Uzumaki-san, she said. Naruto raised an eyebrow and glanced at the Hyuga girl. Why's that? I thought you were displeased with us, or whatever. With both of us sleeping, you'd be free of us until Kakashi-sensei shows up, he said. Hinata frowned. Yes, I am quite displeased with this cell, and I would much prefer to be with another team, but the two of you more or less sleeping on the job lessens my view of you even further. Is that what you want, Uzumaki-san? She asked. Naruto burst out laughing, earning a questioning from the heiress. It's hilarious that you think I give a damn about what you think of me or this team. You're stuck with us whether you like it or not. Hell, since we're, a team, maybe you should follow our example and take a nap. You definitely need your beauty sleep, he retorted. Hinata felt her face burn at the comment. How dare you, she growled. The blonde chuckled at her obvious indignation and closed his eyes to sleep. Don't get so worked up. They say it makes you age faster, he said with a close-eyed grin. The heiress opened her mouth to berate him further, but closed it again when she realized he was asleep. How on earth do they do that? They just close their eyes, and then they fall asleep. Narcoleptics, the lot of them, she thought to herself. She studied the faces of her teammates, as they slept, and frowned. Why do men sleep with their mouths open, she wondered. Hinata, out of curiosity, activated her Byakugan to search for her behind-schedule sensei. Be it due to the limits of her extended vision, or the extent to which Kakashi was late, she could not locate him. Just as she was about to deactivate her dojutsu, she spotted something unusual. Why is Uzumaki-san's stomach glowing? She wondered. She focused her gaze on the blonde's abdomen and frowned. While not visible to the average person's eye, one with a Byakugan would be remiss to not notice the bright mass of bound chakra centered in the boy's stomach. It looks to be a seal. In fact, it appears to be in the pattern of the 8 trigrams. Why on earth does this cretin have such a complicated work of fuinjutsu on his body? She wondered to herself. Undressing him with your eyes, huh? Not what I expected to walk in on, but pretty funny either way. Hinata whipped around and saw Irika sitting on a nearby rock, a look of amusement on his scarred face. She looked back to Naruto and snorted. Not in 1,000 years. And if I ever did, he should be honored. It's not every day a lowlife like him is examined by a high-class citizen, she said haughtily. Irika chuckled and took a sip from a water canteen he had brought along. You might want to control your ego, Hinata. He's not as lowly as you seem to think he is. Neither is Shikamaru. I think you'll be surprised by how well they do during this test Kakashi has put together for you, he said. The Hyuga girl raised an eyebrow. What do you know about him? She asked skeptically, gesturing to Naruto. Her former instructor smiled as he thought back to the night of Naruto's promotion OT Genin. Much more than you do. I won't deny that his scores were abysmal. He was called dead last for a reason, but he's not an idiot, not really, he replied. Hinata deactivated her Byakugan and sat down on the ground. I'll be the judge of that. I've heard that Nara-san is actually quite intelligent, so I have high hopes for him as a teammate. But the same can't be said for my feelings regarding Uzumaki-san, she said. Irika sighed and stood up from the rock he was sitting on, turning to leave the training ground. Don't judge a book by its cover, Hinata. I think you'll find that you've been given a good pair of teammates, he said before disappearing into a puff of smoke. The heiress shook her head and sighed. She glanced back at Naruto, whose mouth was still open as he slept. You somehow find ways to be irritating even while you're asleep, Uzumaki-san. Color me impressed, she thought to herself. She then reached forward and pressed the bottom of the blonde's chin upward, closing his mouth. The heiress infused a bit of chakra into his jaw to ensure his mouth stayed closed. She smiled triumphantly when his jaw stayed locked. That takes care of that. Kakashi rubbed his exposed eye as he entered the training grounds. He was nearly an hour late, but he had an excuse prepared, as he always did. Once he was fully within the field, his team became visible. All three were awake, with Naruto rubbing his jaw for whatever reason, and Shikamaru looking as exhausted as he always did. Hinata, as per usual, was waiting attentively. Yo. Sorry for the long wait. I ran into an old buddy of mine who needed help cleaning out his rain gutters, he lied. Based upon the looks on the faces of his genin, none of them believed his story. Now that we're all here, I'll explain your test. This will be the true genin exam, so you'd better pay attention, he said. All three children, Hinata included, gave him a look of confusion and disbelief. What? I thought we became genin when we performed the clone jutsu, Shikamaru said. Kakashi shook his head, feeling a limited degree of sympathy for the group. That test was simply an entrance exam. You gained the right to attempt to become genin. You still have one more test, he explained. Hinata then motioned for him to continue. The jonin produced a pair of bells and presented them to the group. You're going to be trying to take these bells from me. Capturing a bell ensures your position on this team, he explained. Naruto furrowed his eyebrows. But there are only 2 bell. There are 3 of us, he pointed out. The silver-haired ninja shrugged and attached the bells to his belt. I guess you'll just have to work extra hard if you want to be a ninja. There are 27 graduates this year, and based on previous years, only 9 of them will pass their true exam. The percentage of students who fail this test is 66%, he said. The group all gave a collective gasp at the revelation. After they calmed themselves down, Kakashi stepped back and took out his orange book. All right, we should get started. We don't have all day. You have exactly 4 hours to take these bells from me, he said. The group nodded and awaited the signal to begin. After several tense moments, the jonin nodded and motioned for them to attack. Naruto, being quite impatient by nature, made a hand seal. 4 doppelgangers of himself appeared. This shouldn't be that hard, he said obliviously. He and his clones then charged Kakashi, who had not glanced up from his book. As the multiple copies Naruto reached him, the silver-haired ninja effortlessly dodged their attacks, destroying 2 of the 4 in a single motion that was too fast for the blonde to detect with his eyes. Shadow clones? That's impressive. Most Chunin can't use that technique, Kakashi complimented as he casually maneuvered around Naruto and his clones. Why the hell are you reading a book during a fist fight? The excitable genin demanded as he was matadored time and time again. Kakashi responded by destroying the remaining pair of clones with a single shuriken. Because I can do both. Multitasking is an important skill, he said as he turned a page. Naruto growled and swung a right-handed punch at his teacher's head. Kakashi leaned back, causing the punch to miss by inches. He then countered with a hard, rising knee to the genin's jaw, buckling his legs and sending him reeling back. Surprisingly, Kakashi did pursue the stunned boy, instead opting to continue reading his book. It was unwise to attack him so recklessly, Uzumaki-san. Although, your ability to use the shadow clone jutsu will certainly be useful, Hinata said as Naruto climbed to his feet. She then stepped forward. I would like to try my hand at fighting him, she said, assuming her stance as she spoke. Shikamaru raised an eyebrow. Are you sure that's a good idea? Sounds detrimental to your health if you asked me, he said. The heiress smirked and charged forward at Kakashi. The jonin glanced up from his book and sidestepped her charge. To his surprise, the hyuga girl pivoted and adjusted her trajectory. She launched a palm strike at his chest, forcing him to evade. I can't afford to read with this one, it seems, Kakashi thought to himself. He closed his book and focused on Hinata. He stood his ground as she approached and pulled his head to the left, allowing a palm strike to whiz past his face. He intercepted her forward movement with a short punch to her nose that she ran face first into. Hinata froze in place upon absorbing the strike, allowing the silver-haired ninja to follow up with a kick to her chest that launched her back toward her teammates. She crashed into Naruto, sending them both to the ground. He reached for his book, but found that he no longer had control of his body. I honestly can't believe that worked. Kakashi glanced over his shoulder and sighed. Shikamaru had made his way behind him during his scuffle with Hinata and connected his shadow to the jonins. The lazy genin slowly made his way to Kakashi, forcing the silver-haired ninja to walk towards him as well. Once they were within arm's length of one another, Shikamaru reached for the bells. Before he could touch them, however, his arm was seized by Kakashi. That was clever. I'm impressed, Shikamaru. The one thing you failed to consider, though, is that the shadow possession technique can be broken if the difference in strength between the victim and caster is large enough, the jonin said. He then spun the Nara around by his wrists and threw him at his teammates. Unlike Hinata, Shikamaru was caught by Naruto and set down without slamming into the hard field ground. You almost had him, Shikamaru. If she and I can keep him occupied, we can take those bells, Naruto said as the shadow user dusted himself off. I doubt the same tactic will work twice. This man is clearly adept, and well-versed as a combatant. Either way, the fact still stands that there are only 2 bells, meaning that one of us will be sent back to the academy regardless, Hinata said. Shikamaru thought for a moment, studying Kakashi carefully. I don't think the point of this test is to actually capture the bells. It's a bit more complex than that. There are no 3-man cells in this village. All of them are 4-man. There's literally no way for us to take those bells from him. Hinata is pretty clearly the best fighter here, and she got her ass handed to her. He isn't even trying all that hard either, he said. The group all racked their brains. Teamwork. We have to work in tandem to show that we can function as a single unit on the battlefield, Hinata said. Naruto nodded in agreement. That sounds about right. I think we should still do what we can to try to get the bells, just to prove a point, he said. The team then discussed their plan of attack as Kakashi assessed them. The jonin smiled to himself as they assumed their stances and turned their attention to him. Looks like I've got a group of sharp ones. This might be a little more fun than I thought it would be. Team 7 all dropped to their backs out of exhaustion. The 4-hour time limit had been reached, and they had never even come close to obtaining a bell, with the closest call being when Naruto had managed to touch one of them with his pinky. He's really strong. How the hell were we supposed to get one of those bells from him? Naruto asked through deep breaths. Hinata sat up and wiped a bead of sweat from her brow. Remember, the point was never to actually acquire one of the bells, but to simply push him. I think we may have accomplished at least that much, she said tiredly. Shikamaru rolled over onto his stomach and groaned. This was way too much work. I just want a nap, he grumbled. Naruto chuckled and struggled to his feet. Preaching to the choir, buddy. I could use a few hours of sleep myself, he said. A puff of smoke then erupted from the ground in front of them. From it emerged Kakashi. Well, you failed to capture even a single bell, which is disappointing, but your showing as a team was impressive nonetheless, he said with an approving nod. The children all felt a spark of hope, and as such, I think I'll take all 3 of you on as my genin team. Your tactics were a bit repetitive at times, but that can be fixed fairly easily. Congratulations, you three. You're now officially members of Team 7, he said with a thumbs up. The genin collectively heaved a sigh of relief. As a reward for being my first team to pass, you have the rest of the day to yourselves. Have fun, it'll be your last day off for a while, he said before turning and walking away. Naruto stretched and glanced back at his teammates. Want to grab some lunch? I'll pay, he asked. Hinata shook her head and stood up, dusting herself off as she did so. I would rather not. I have something to attend to, she replied. She then walked past the blonde toward the village. The excitable genin looked to Shikamaru. What about you? He asked. The shadow user shrugged and nodded his head. He stood up and motioned for Naruto to lead the way. Yeah, sure. I haven't eaten since yesterday, he said. The boys then took off jogging back toward Konoha. For the first time in several years, Naruto ate lunch with a companion. Chapter 3 Insensitive. Naruto sighed as he cleaned out the rain gutters on the roof of the Hokage building. D-rank missions had never sounded appealing, but this was nothing more than janitor's work. Something an already retired, elderly shinobi should be doing, not a group of, in the cases of Shikamaru and Hinata, clan heirs and heiresses. Despite the mundane nature of the missions, they were still a requirement. In order to participate in anything resembling a C or even B-ranked mission, a genin team had to complete 10 D-ranked missions at the bare minimum. What time is it? Naruto asked. Hinata pulled out her pocket watch and scowled at what she saw. Nearly 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We've been here since 7 o'clock. Almost 4 hours of grunt work. This is just pathetic, she grumbled. Shikamaru chuckled as he cleaned out his section of the gutter. At least we're doing this on a dry day. If this had been last week, this would have been an all-day assignment. Look on the bright side for once, you two. All we have to do is work at this and we'll be done in no time, he said. Both Naruto and Hinata snorted, this coming from the person who had an even lower homework completion rate than Uzumaki-san. And that's really saying something, she retorted. The blonde scrunched up his nose. Did you have to insult me too? He asked irritatedly. The hyuga heiress shrugged and shoveled out another glob of muck from the gutter. I'm simply stating facts. Neither you nor Nara-san were good students in the least. The fact that the two of you became genin is baffling to me. Your passing of the initial exam in particular, Uzumaki-san, is an indictment on the academy, she said bluntly. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Why's that? I think I know your answer, but I'd still like to hear it, he asked curiously. Hinata gestured to Shikamaru, who had completely detached himself from conversation as he sensed the rising tension. Nara-san passing makes logical sense if you look at it from a political perspective. He is the heir to the Nara family, a major clan in the pharmaceutical industry as well as wildlife preservation. Had he not passed, there would have been uproar from his family. The academy is very conflict-averse, so his promotion to genin was an inevitability. You, though, Uzumaki-san, have no such family lineage to speak of. In fact, you have no family to speak of at all, to my knowledge, she began. Shikamaru frowned and looked up from his gutter, suddenly quite invested in the conversation at hand. Furthermore, there is not a single citizen of this village, save for Irika Yumino, that views you in a positive light. Our walk to the Hokage building is proof of that fact. You're an outcast of the highest caliber, she said coldly. Shikamaru scowled and glared at Hinata. This is going too far, Hinata, he warned. Despite the shadow user's words, the hyuga heiress continued her insensitive speech. If I had to guess, Irika felt sympathy for you, wondering why the village as a whole seems to detest you, and gave you a promotion out of the goodness of his heart. If he had stopped to consider simple logic, he would realize that the vote of the majority outweighs that of the outlier. The result of that metaphorical vote is that you, Naruto Uzumaki, are not worth anybody's time, including mine, she concluded. Shikamaru's mouth hung open in shock at her words. That was completely uncalled for, he said. He took a step forward, but was stopped by Naruto, who put up a hand. It's fine, Shikamaru. She isn't exactly wrong. Let's just keep working. None of us want to be here anyway, so we should pick up the pace, he said quietly. The team worked in silence for the rest of the afternoon, finishing the job at 3 o'clock. They made their way down from the roof once the assignment was complete, and entered the building to collect their pay. The silence remained until they were intercepted by Kakashi, who had been waiting for them in the lobby of the building since the beginning of the gutter cleaning. That took a little longer than I thought it would, but you finished before dark, meaning we probably have time to get in some light sparring, he said. He gestured for the genin to follow him, an order that the children followed. The jonin lead them back to the same training ground at which they had taken the belt test. I'm going to evaluate your current levels of proficiency in taijutsu. You'll each be sparring both of your teammates once. Naruto, you'll be sparring Shikamaru first, he ordered. The boys nodded and assumed their stances. You may begin whenever you like, Kakashi said. Naruto, as expected, led the dance, charging forward with a flurry of punches and kicks. Shikamaru sighed and moved away from the blonde, allowing himself to only be grazed by 1 or 2 odd strikes. The Nara eventually stood his ground and swung back with a right-handed punch, which connected right between Naruto's eyes. They've definitely got the spirit, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done, Kakashi muttered. He glanced at Hinata, whose face was contorted in displeasure. They're completely amateurish. They fall over their own feet, there's no real weight behind their strikes, and they have no semblance of defense, she said. The silver-haired Jonin shrugged. Neither one of them has been given formal training in taijutsu beyond what the academy taught them, and most of what you learn in the academy isn't applicable in the real world, he said. The pair watched the sloppy match for several more minutes before Kakashi commented once more. You have to give it to Naruto, though. He's clearly less coordinated than Shikamaru, but he's completely tireless. He's taking it to him right now, he said as the blonde connected with 3 hard punches to the body and head of the Nara. Hinata nodded in agreement. His stamina is remarkable, and his durability is nonsensical. The number of clean punches he's absorbed without blinking is frankly amazing. Given training, he could be quite good at this, she said. Just as she finished her sentence, Naruto sent Shikamaru to the ground with a hard punch to the left side of his jaw. Kakashi immediately leapt between the boys. That's enough, you two. The winner is Naruto, he said. The blonde helped his teammate to his feet and smiled. You're annoying as hell to fight. You might have loosened one of my teeth, he said. Shikamaru chuckled and made his way over to Kakashi. Hinata, meanwhile, had made her way to Naruto and was awaiting instructions from the Jonin. You may both begin, the silver-haired ninja called after a minute or 2 of silence. Naruto wasted no time in attacking his teammate. Unlike Shikamaru, Hinata did not take a step backward in response to his forward charge. Instead, she mirrored the action and moved forward. When they collided, Naruto missed badly with a right-handed punch. Hinata countered the strike with a palm strike to the arm that he had attempted to strike her with. The blonde felt the limb go numb immediately. He immediately disengaged and cradled the arm gently. Okay, what the hell was that? He demanded. The Hyuga heiress responded to his question by pushing forward and striking him 3 more times, this time to his ribcage. Naruto coughed painfully, a bit of blood pooling in his mouth. Instead of cowering to the discomfort, he clenched his jaw and swung back, missing badly and absorbing a hard counter to the side of his face. She's carving him up. This is a mismatch, Shikamaru said as Hinata pummeled the excitable genin. Kakashi nodded and winced as Naruto was buckled by a kick to the right side of his neck. Her clan specializes in taijutsu, so there was never any chance of Naruto being competitive with her at this point, he said. Naruto was then knocked down 3 consecutive times, all with the same counter. Kakashi sighed and stepped in to halt the match. That's it. I've seen enough. The winner is Hinata, he said. The Hyuga girl offered no hand of assistance to her fallen teammate, instead opting to watch him struggle to his feet. Use the left side of your body, Uzumaki-san, she said once he was up to his feet. The blonde frowned and rubbed his jaw. What do you mean? He asked curiously. Hinata gestured to left arm and left leg, both of which were numb and difficult to move. You only throw strikes with your right hand and right leg. That's why I was able to counter you in identical fashion so many consecutive times. Had you been varying your attack, you may have been able to hit me at some point, she explained. Naruto considered her advice for a moment. Good point. I'll keep that in mind. Thanks, Hinata, he said, earning an almost imperceptible nod of approval from the Hyuga girl. He hobbled over to Kakashi and Shikamaru, patting the shadow user on the back once he reached them. You're up, buddy. Have fun out there, he said with a grin. Shikamaru sighed heavily and gave him a thumbs up. I'm just shaking with anticipation, he said sarcastically. Once he reached Hinata, he assumed his taijutsu stance and looked to Kakashi. Let's get this over with, sensei, he said tiredly. The Jonin nodded and signaled for them to begin. As the match began, Naruto looked to his teacher. How long do you think this one lasts? He asked humorously. Kakashi thought for a moment, observing Hinata's predictable domination as he did so. Shikamaru is a sharper striker than you are, but isn't as tireless, and you definitely take a shot better, so I'll say 2.5 minutes, he said. The pair observed the match to its conclusion, in which Hinata doubled the shadow user over with a kick to the ribs. 3 minutes. You weren't far off, Kakashi-sensei, Naruto said as the silver-haired ninja made his way towards Hinata and Shikamaru to halt the match. Once the genin were separated, Kakashi gathered the children together. You all show promise in a variety of ways, but you all need work. That includes you, Hinata. None of you are particularly good at minding your P's and Q's while you're attacking, and you're all somewhat one-note with your strike selection. That can all be fixed in due time, so no worries, he said with a nod. He glanced at the dark sky and then back to his team. It's dark out now, so I suppose that's all we have time for. Meet me at the Hokage building at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, he said before disappearing into a puff of smoke. Naruto sighed. Does he always have to just disappear at the end of the day? He muttered. His teammates both shared the sentiment, as they were both glaring at the place Kakashi had once stood. The blonde then began to walk back towards Konoha. I'm going home. See you guys tomorrow, he said with a wave. Shikamaru then followed suit, leaving Hinata alone in the field. She fixed her gaze on Naruto as he walked away. I suppose I have the time, she thought to herself. She dusted herself off and took a sip of water from her canteen. She then began to silently follow the blonde. Hinata rubbed her eyes as she trailed Naruto through Konoha. His trek home was apparently a long one, because it had been nearly 15 minutes since he and his undetected companion had left the training grounds, and they had not reached his home yet. The Hyuga girl's reasoning for following him stemmed entirely from curiosity. As she had pointed out during her speech to the blonde on the Hokage building roof, Naruto had no family to speak of, and no other legal guardian, meaning that he almost certainly lived alone. His living situation was likely not particularly good, but the prospect of a child living all by his lonesome still fascinated Hinata. After several more minutes of walking, they reached an apartment building and climbed a flight of stairs. The Hyuga heiress hid herself behind a corner as Naruto arrived at what she assumed to be his home. He turned the door knob and opened the door. Instead of making his way inside, he glanced over his shoulder and sighed. You can come out now, he called. Hinata felt her stomach drop. From the tone of his voice, he had been aware of her presence the entire time. The Hyuga girl slowly rounded the corner and presented herself to the blonde. You detected me. Good work, Uzumaki-san. You've surpassed my expectations, she said. Naruto studied her for a moment. Why are you here? Don't you have a curfew? He asked. Hinata nodded and glanced at her pocket watch. I do have a curfew, but my attendance record for family dinners is perfect. One absence won't incur the wrath of my father, she said. The excitable genin nodded and leaned against the wall. You still haven't told me why you're here. I know you're not some crazed fan of mine, quite the opposite actually, so what do you want? He asked tiredly. Hinata took several seconds to put together a feasible explanation. I was curious as to your living situation. Given that you're an orphan, I would assume that you live alone? She asked. Naruto nodded. Yeah, I do. Why do you care about my living situation anyway? Are you looking for something else to mock? He asked bluntly. Hinata flinched at his hard tone. I don't know. I wanted to understand your home life a bit better, I suppose, she said carefully. The blonde snorted. Oh, sorry for jumping to conclusions. Want to come inside? Have some tea maybe? He asked sarcastically. The Hyuga heiress shifted uncomfortably. No thank you. May I ask why you don't appear to have any neighbors? She asked. Naruto shrugged, tapped on the wall. They all left this floor when I moved in a few years back. I didn't do anything, but they just decided to book it. Kind of like you said earlier, actually. People don't see me as a worthwhile person, so they avoid me, he said matter-of-factly. Hinata opened her mouth to ask another question, but shut it again when Naruto raised a hand. Don't ask me anything else, Hinata. My patience is wearing out. If it satisfies your curiosity, my home life isn't all that interesting, because I don't have one, he said. Thank you? That's all I wanted to know. Good night, Uzumaki-san, she said, turning to leave as she spoke. Naruto responded by entering his apartment and closing the door. Hinata quickly made her way out of the apartment complex and began jogging home. He is quite unpleasant when he's tired. Chapter 4, Civility. Naruto rubbed his eyes as he waited at the entrance of the Hokage building. He was earlier than even Hinata. This was an entirely intentional aberration from his usual tendency of showing up on or before a deadline. It was a subtle form of payback. Go ahead. Invade in on my terrible personal life anytime you want, Hinata. I'll find ways to piss you off for it, he thought to himself. He yawned and took a sip of water from a bottle he had bought on his way to the building. It had been vastly overpriced, as was the norm for Naruto when dealing with businesses of all shapes and sizes. After several more minutes of monotonous silence, Hinata arrived, as polished and groomed as she always was. Morning, Hinata. Have a nice night? The blonde asked politely. The Hyuga girl stopped several feet from him, her eyes narrowed and her posture stagnant. She was clearly not a fan of having been beaten to the Hokage building, especially by Naruto. After a moment of silence, she nodded and walked to the bench, sitting down once she reached it. Yes, I did. My father was quite understanding of my predicament, so I received no punishment for my tardiness, she replied. The excitable genin raised an eyebrow and glanced at his teammate skeptically. What do you mean predicament? You followed me home and refused to leave until I told you all about my shitty living situation. That sounds more like a predicament for me than you, he said. Hinata scowled at his words. Refrain from using such profanity when speaking to me, Uzumaki-san. It makes you even less desirable to talk to than you already are. As for what my predicament was, it was that I knew virtually nothing about who you were. I already knew what I needed to know about Nara-san, but your situation was a mystery to me. I like to be well studied when conversing with people, she explained. Naruto snorted. You still don't know a thing about me, Hinata. Just because you've pieced together that I'm an orphan who lives alone doesn't mean that you know how I think and how I function. All you really did was piss me off, he retorted. The pair lapsed into silence at his words. After several minutes of silence, Hinata spoke. Did you ever have parents? A family? She asked. The blonde sighed and ran his hand through his hair. No. I've been alone from day one. I haven't seen any pictures, read any family scripts, or found any history on them. I wonder sometimes if I even had parents. Who knows? Maybe I'm the world's first artificially created human, he joked. Despite the jovial nature of his words, his voice held an easily detectable undertone of pain. The Hyuga girl felt her stomach wrench at his words. She studied him as he stared off into the early morning sun. I doubt that you're artificial, Uzumaki-san. You're far too uniquely frustrating to have been created by another person. You had a family, you were just unfortunate enough to have lost them before you could form memories of them, she said. Naruto chuckled and turned his gaze to the Hyuga heiress. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me, even if it was kind of an insult. Thank you, Hinata, he said with a tired smile. Hinata immediately began to feel defensive. It was not meant to be comforting. I was simply stating the extremely low likelihood that you were made in a lab of some kind, she said quickly. The blonde laughed a bit at her reaction, earning a questioning glare from the Hyuga girl. You aren't great with people, are you? He asked. Hinata opened her mouth to retort, but sighed and shut it again. No, I am not. I spend what little free time I have reading rather than socializing. I especially avoid people like you, Uzumaki-san. People who have little to no regard for the standards put in place by the society they live in, she said. Naruto burst out laughing again, frustrating his teammate further. Man, you're no fun. Living by such a strict set of rules is boring. Loosen up a little. I think you'd be a whole lot happier if you did, he suggested. The Hyuga heiress prickled and glared at the blonde. No, I will not loosen up. Why on earth would I want to forget my manners and sink to your level? I would never even consider it, she snapped. Naruto put up his hands and grinned. I guess I was right. You really do need your beauty sleep. You get cranky when you don't get it, he joked, well aware that he was walking a fine line. Hinata's hand shot forward, seizing the bottom of his jaw and pulling his face until it was only an inch from hers. You seem to garner quite a bit of pleasure from insulting my appearance, Uzumaki-san. You have absolutely no room to talk. You're a mongrel compared to me. In layman's terms, I'm out of your league. You should be honored that I'm even touching your face. In fact, you should savor the sensation, because it's the one and only time you'll ever feel it, she hissed before shoving him backwards by his face. The excitable genin stumbled back several steps, laughing as he did so. He rubbed his jaw upon regaining his balance. Soft hands. You've got a grip like a crocodile, though, he said. Hinata growled, but calmed herself down once more and sighed heavily. Why are you being so aggressively mocking today? She asked. Naruto's jovial demeanor vanished instantly, and was replaced with a hard glare. I feel like I don't have much of a choice. When I'm rude, you snap at me and insult my lifestyle. When I try to be polite, you get defensive and insult me some more. If everything I do is going to piss you off, I might as well try to have some fun with you while I'm at it, he said. The Hyuga girl frowned. What do you gain from speaking to me at all? It seems like things would be easier for the both of us if we swore to silence, she asked. The blonde pointed to his forehead protector and shrugged. Whether you like it or not, we're teammates now. I would rather have something resembling a functional relationship with you than be at your throat. We're going to be fighting, and maybe even dying together. Dying next to somebody I hate isn't a goal of mine. If you'll let me, I'm willing to at least try to be nice to you, he said. Hinata pursed her lips and exhaled through her nose. I suppose that's reasonable. I still don't like you, Uzumaki-san, but I'll try to be more civil if you do the same, she said. Naruto nodded and pulled out granola bar. Well, at least we can agree on some things, he said. He then produced a second granola bar and tossed it at the hyuga heiress, forcing her to catch it reflexively. She glanced at it skeptically. What's this? She asked. Naruto tore open the wrapper of his bar and took a bite of it, chewing it for several moments before swallowing and speaking. Symbolism, he said simply. Hinata studied the small parcel of food and sighed, unwrapping it and taking a bite. She scowled as she chewed it. Raisin. Of course. It's the thought that counts, I suppose. Kakashi chuckled as he led his team into Hiruzen's office. Naruto's lower jaw was imprinted with what looked like the outline of a hand, and he was clearly not aware of it. He and Hinata had arrived nearly an hour early, meaning that they had spent much of that time together. In all likelihood, the hand that had imprinted on Naruto's face was hers. Either she tried to rip his face off, or she's really warming up to him. I'm guessing it's the first one, the Jonin thought to himself as he watched the pair walk alongside Shikamaru. The team entered the Hokage's office and closed the door, awaiting instruction from the elderly man. I would assume you're here for an assignment? In which case, I have another clean-up assignment for you. It should be fairly simple, Hiruzen, who was smoking his pipe, as per usual, said. Naruto groaned. Can't we get something a little better than that? We've been cleaning out gutters and toilets all week, he complained. To his surprise, Hinata nodded in agreement. With all due respect, Hokage-sama, I feel that our unit has proven itself to be quite capable of completing mundane grunt work. I believe a true test of our functionality is in order, she chimed in. Hiruzen raised an eyebrow and looked to Kakashi. They aren't entirely wrong, Kakashi. Would you like to take them out on a C-ranked mission? He asked. The silver-haired ninja thought for a moment. We still haven't asked Shikamaru his opinion yet, he said, casting a glance towards his lazy student. The shadow user shrugged and gestured to his teammates. I could really care less. They've got me outvoted even if I didn't want to. Go right ahead, he said. The Jonin nodded and looked back to the Hokage. Give us a C-ranked mission. I think they can handle it at this point, he said. Hiruzen nodded and tossed the scroll to Kakashi. He unfurled it and chuckled. A bridge builder, huh? Sounds simple enough. When and where do we meet this man? He asked curiously. The elderly Kage pointed to the clock and grinned. This will also be a test of your ability to effectively pack, because you will be leaving in 1 hour. He will be waiting for you at the front gates of the village. His name is Tazuna, he said. The genin all turned white. How long will we be gone? Naruto asked. Hiruzen thought for a moment before holding up a finger. 1 week at the minimum. Pack for longer, just in case, he replied. The blonde nodded and bolted out of the office. Hinata sighed heavily. No manners, that boy, she grumbled to herself before bowing to the Hokage respectfully and taking a step back. I will be leaving to pack, Hokage-sama. Good day, she said smoothly, turning to exit the office upon finishing her sentence. Shikamaru soon followed suit and left the room, leaving only Kakashi and Hiruzen. Are you beginning to understand my reasoning for putting this team together, Kakashi? The Hokage asked. The silver-haired ninja glanced out of the window of the office and watched his students walk down the streets of the village. Naruto and Shikamaru get along fine, but Hinata detests Naruto with a passion. They routinely get into it over small things, and she's said some cruel things to him. I don't like the way their personalities mesh, he said honestly. The old man took a drag from his pipe and smiled. Those scuffles are precisely why I assigned them to be in a cell together. Hinata is supremely talented, but she has something of a superiority complex, and she's a social infant in many regards. Naruto has a way of beating humility into people just by being unshakable. Naruto can also learn a thing or two about punctuality and etiquette from Hinata, he explained. Kakashi nodded and turned to leave. Did you know that Hinata followed Naruto home last night? The old man called out. The Jonin raised an eyebrow and turned back around. No, I didn't. This sounds like quite the story. Would you mind telling it? He asked. Hiruzen chuckled and pulled out his crystal ball from underneath his desk. First and foremost, I tend to keep an eye on Naruto if he's out and about at night, for obvious reasons. Last night, he was trailed from the training ground by Hinata all the way until he reached his apartment. He was aware of her presence nearly the entire time, but chose to wait until reaching his doorstep to acknowledge her presence, he began. The silver-haired ninja nodded and motioned for him to continue. Hinata had followed him in order to gain a clearer idea about his living situation. Naruto became angry when she told him this, perceiving it as an attack on his status as an orphan. Primarily because Hinata had made a scathing remark regarding his position as the village pariah earlier that day. They conversed for several minutes about his lack of a home life, going their separate ways after several minutes, he said. Kakashi nodded once more. That was quite insensitive of her. She seems to only see things objectively, he said. The Hokage chuckled and relit his pipe. Quite so. They had a much less negative conversation outside of the Hokage building this morning, but even then, Hinata took a joke much too seriously and marked up Naruto's face. Their relationship isn't good as of yet, but I'm feeling optimistic as to its direction, he said. The Jonin snorted. Why is that? At this rate, she'll cripple Naruto before the mission even begins, he said. Hiruzen smiled in reminiscing fashion. They remind me strongly of Minato and Kushina, he said. Kakashi laughed out loud at the statement. Oh please, they're nothing like them. Naruto is a little like Sensei was in his youth, but Hinata and Kushina are nothing alike, he said. The Hokage shook his head. It's a stretch, I'll give you that. Hinata is much calmer than Kushina was on a moment-by-moment basis, but she has a comparable temper, and she also has a similar tendency to resort to forms of physical violence when angered. Although Hinata's methods are much more picturesque, he said. The silver-haired ninja thought for a moment before shrugging and turning to leave once more. I guess I can see it, but don't get your hopes up. I personally think they're more likely to kill each other than start a family, he said. He then exited the office and closed the door behind him. Hiruzen smiled to himself and glanced down at his crystal ball. What he saw was more than a bit concerning. Naruto, who looked quite terrified, and Hyuga having a conversation in the middle of the street. Chapter 5 Mission Start. Naruto felt a bead of nervous sweat trickle down his forehead as he was assessed by the head of the illustrious Hyuga clan. He was tall, had long brown, and wore a cold glare that was identical to Hinata's. Like father, like daughter, I guess. Maybe it's the eyes, the blonde thought nervously as he squirmed under the man's gaze. After several more moments of tense silence, Hayashi spoke for the first time. Good morning, Uzumaki-san. I trust that your missions have been successful as of late? He asked. Naruto nodded and sighed. Yeah, they've been pretty simple. Just a whole bunch of D-rank missions. All we've really been doing is cleaning out people's gutters and carrying things. I think grunt work is the term Hinata used, he replied. The clan head chuckled. You do realize that you effectively are grunts as of now, correct? He said. The blonde nodded and kicked a rock that was sitting at his feet. You mentioned my daughter's name. She happens to be what I've sought you out to discuss, Hayashi said matter-of-factly. All of the fear that the genin had been suppressing immediately flared up again. Oh. What did you want to talk about? I mean, she has been saying that she wants to move teams. Is that what this is about? He asked. The clan head shook his head. She will not be switching cells. She must learn to adapt despite her dissatisfaction. Not that she didn't complain, because she most certainly did. Angrily. What I've come here to talk to you about specifically, Uzumaki-san, is my daughter's intrusion on your privacy last night. I would like to apologize on her behalf, he said. Naruto did a double take. An apology was quite literally the last thing he had expected. You don't really need to apologize. She just followed me home. Her reasoning is a little confusing and frustrating, but you didn't have to come all the way out here to apologize, he said carefully. Hayashi pointed at the boy's fist, which was clenched tightly. You've become tense just from speaking about the incident. My daughter is more than a bit insensitive at times, and she has a bad habit of being something of an egomaniac. She does mean well, believe it or not, but she doesn't think about who her words damage when she speaks, he said. The blonde looked to the ground. It's not like I haven't called her on a little. I honestly deserve a lot of the backlash I get from her, he said. The clan head sighed. She has no comprehension of sarcasm in many cases. She's socially inept, to be perfectly honest. Which is why I would like to make a request, he said. Naruto frowned, but nodded and motioned for the man to continue. You certainly aren't a glowing example of etiquette. In fact, your manners are quite appalling from what I've seen, but that is exactly why I was not bothered by your placement on a team with Hinata. I would like you to, how do I put this, chip away at her shell, shall we say. Don't shy away from her because she is aloof and proud. Take any opportunity to interact. Do that, and she may loosen up a bit, Hayashi said. The genin thought for a moment before nodding. I can do that, I guess. Is there anything else you want me to do? He asked. The clan head nodded. Keep her safe. Intimidating as she may be, she has limitations, he said. Naruto chuckled and scratched the back of his head. She's a hell of a lot stronger than me, Hayashi-sama. I don't think she needs or wants my protection, he said. Hayashi chuckled. Stronger, HM? This coming from the boy who pummeled a Chunin with a mob of 1,000 shadow clones. I think you'll do just fine, he said. The blonde furrowed his eyebrows. How do you know about all of that? He asked skeptically. The clan head smirked and turned to leave. Nothing happens in this village without my knowing about it. Keep that in mind, Uzumaki-san, he said as he walked away. Naruto watched the man as the distance between them grew larger. What was that supposed to mean? Hinata nodded in approval as Naruto arrived at the gates. He was the last to appear, but he was still on time. Despite his punctuality, he looked quite stressed. Sorry I'm late. I ran into someone, and they stopped me to talk, he explained as he leaned against the side of the gate. The Hyuga girl raised an eyebrow at the explanation. And who was this person? I mean no offense to you, but I highly doubt a random citizen of Konoha would stop to talk to you, she said. The blonde scrambled for an explanation that didn't involve her father. Iruka was out and about. We talked about what I should expect on my first out-of-town mission. Just student-teacher stuff, he explained quickly. Hinata stared at him for several moments, clearly skeptical. Eventually, she nodded and turned her attention back to an old man who was conversing with Kakashi. Who is that? Is that who we're escorting? Naruto asked curiously. Shikamaru, who had been silently sitting on a bench nearby, nodded. Yeah. That's Tazuna. Exactly what you'd expect of an old bridge builder. Cranky and temperamental, he said with a chuckle. The group then set off with Kakashi and Shikamaru in the lead. Naruto and Hinata walked alongside Tazuna on either side of him. They trekked on in silence for roughly an hour before Naruto spoke. So, what's this bridge for? He asked curiously. The bridge builder glanced at him and took a sip from a bottle of alcohol. Trade. The land of waves will gain a great amount of financial benefit from having a crossable structure to connect it to the land of fire. It's extremely important, he explained. The blonde nodded and kept his eyes on the trail ahead. What kinds of things does your country specialize in? I haven't done much research on the land of waves, Hinata asked. Tazuna made a wide motion with his hand. Anything really. We have plenty of resources. Which is why we so desperately need this bridge. We're fairly poor as a whole, so such a trade route would be incredibly useful, he said. The Hyuga girl frowned at this. From the sounds of it, this is a monumentally important bridge. Why would you only request a team of genin for such an important task? She asked suspiciously. The old man tensed at the question, but quickly calmed himself. There won't be anything that you can't handle. Just bandits and such, he assured. Both Naruto and Hinata eyed him skeptically, but chose to let it go. The group traveled for several more miles before Hinata stopped, her Byakugan suddenly active. We have company, she whispered. The blonde looked to Kakashi and Shikamaru, who were both halted as well. There were several moments of silence before Hinata suddenly tripped Naruto to the ground and tackled Tazuna. A blur of metallic movement flew over them as they looked on in shock from the ground. Pay better attention. We can't afford to allow Tazuna-san to be injured, the Hyuga girl snapped at Naruto before assuming her stance. The blonde growled and stood up, taking a defensive posture over the bridge builder. The blur of movement then appeared once more. This time, however, Hinata intercepted it with a swift kick, knocking it out of the air and revealing its identity. It was a man with a chain attached to his left arm, and a mask covering the lower half of his face. Not bad, little girl. You've got sharp eyes. Unfortunately for you, not sharp enough, the ninja said menacingly. It was Naruto's turn to trip Hinata, which he did as quickly as he could. As his teammate fell to the ground, another blur flew over her head, landing next to the chain-wielding man. Naruto pulled Hinata to her feet and returned to Tazuna. How about you pay better attention? I can't have you dying out here. It'll cost me my head if you do, he said. The Hyuga girl dusted herself off, mentally taking note of the remark, which sounded oddly specific. They both stared at their enemies, who were assessing them silently. The one that Hinata had kicked took a step forward, but stopped, seemingly frozen in place. What the hell is this? The enemy shinobi demanded. Naruto glanced to his left and grinned. Shikamaru's shadow was connected to those of both of the chain-bearing ninja. Look, even you have to admit that you deserve this. You just sat there. Of course I was going to lock you down, the shadow user said tiredly. Kakashi then made his way to the genin. Well, this is interesting. These two are known as the Demon Brothers if I'm not mistaken. They're Chunin. These aren't bandits, Tazuna. I think you have some explaining to do, he said sternly. The bridge builder opened his mouth to protest strongly, but shut it again and sighed. Fine. I knew these two were coming. They were sent after me to end my life. They don't want me to get back to the land of waves with the blueprints for the bridge, he said. The Jonin frowned underneath his mask. Why would two Chunin be sent to kill a bridge builder? Who sent them? He questioned. Tazuna lowered his eyes to the ground. I can't answer that, he said quietly. Kakashi narrowed his eyes and took a threatening step forward. You'd better. Because, if you don't, we'll abandon you out here and let you be mauled by these two. Shikamaru can release his jutsu any time he feels like it, he warned. The old man pursed his lips and exhaled through his nose. A mob boss named Gato sent them. He controls much of the economy in the land of waves. The bridge would loosen his iron grip, and he wants me dead for that reason, he explained. The silver-haired ninja nodded in understanding. Well, thank you for your honesty. Unfortunately, those details automatically upgrade this mission from C rank to A rank. Far too much for my genin to handle. You're on your own now, he said. Tazuna's head snapped up. Please don't leave me out here. My people need this bridge, he begged. Kakashi shrugged and motioned for his genin to follow him in the opposite direction. That isn't a concern of mine at this point, he replied. To the Jonin's surprise, Naruto, Hinata, and Shikamaru refused to follow him. Hurry up, you three. We don't have all day, he called to them. The blonde shook his head and motioned for his sensei to come back. Look, we've already made it this far, so why don't we just finish the job? It's almost dark anyway, so we should at least sleep on this, he said. Kakashi raised an eyebrow and glanced at the other genin, who nodded. This mission is far beyond your capabilities. Are you sure you actually want to do this? Answer carefully, your lives may depend on it. Literally, he asked. Shikamaru yawned and shrugged. It'd be a hell of a lot more troublesome to run all the way back to Konoha than to just keep doing what we were doing. Let's give this a shot, he said. The silver-haired ninja thought for a moment before finally caving to the combined pressure of his genin stares. Fine, we can try this. Don't say I didn't warn you, though, he said. Tazuna sighed in relief and allowed Kakashi to lead he and the children down the route for another hour. After the hour had passed, it was pitch dark, prompting the party to set up camp. Although it was quite unusual, Team 7 had certainly taken a step up from deranked missions. A much on them was perhaps recommendable. Hinata rubbed her eyes and sat up in her tent. She glanced out of its flap and sighed frustratedly. It was the middle of the night, and it was pitch black. How irritating. I need to be sleeping. We wake at dawn, she thought to herself frustratedly. She laid flat on her back for several more minutes before giving up and exiting her tent. To her surprise, there was a small fire burning roughly 50 feet from the camp, with a single person sitting beside it. The person's identity wasn't clear from her current position, prompting the hyuga girl to quietly make her way toward the fire. Once she reached it, who was sitting beside it became clear. Uzumaki-san? What are you doing awake at this hour? She asked. Naruto glanced over his shoulder at her and shrugged. I can't sleep. I tried for a few hours, but I gave up after a little while. It's a little chilly, so I made this fire. If the light woke you up, I'm sorry, he said. Hinata nodded and sat down across from him on the other side of the dim fire. Is there any particular reason you're having trouble sleeping? She asked curiously. The excitable genin sighed and leaned his head back. Just thinking about a lot of things. Mostly things to do with this mission. Something Kakashi-sensei said really stuck with me, he said. Hinata raised an eyebrow. And what would that be? She asked. Naruto pulled out a kunai and studied it for a moment before sticking it into the ground beside himself. That this mission could cost us our lives. The idea that I could die within a few days is strange. Strange because it's not entirely unwelcome, I guess, he admitted. The hyuga heiress frowned. What do you mean? Why would you not be fearful of your own death? She asked skeptically. The blonde shrugged. I'm not quite as lazy as Shikamaru is, but I'm still decently lazy about certain things. One of those things is responsibilities. Having things expected of me is stressful. It's a completely new feeling. I've never been expected to succeed or anything close to it before. Kicking the bucket now would mean that I wouldn't have to deal with those expectations, he said. The hyuga girl chuckled to herself. I suppose being the village pariah may have a benefit or two. You've never really had to contend with things such as curfews or family standards. It must be a soothing reality to live in, she said. Naruto shook his head. We come from two different places, Hinata. To me, having a standard to live up to sounds like an awesome motivator, and having a curfew would be a really sweet thing. It would make me feel like somebody cared where I went and when, he said. And to me, having neither of those things sounds like a heavenly relief of stress. I suppose you're right. Perspective affects the attractiveness of certain lifestyles, she said, finishing the blonde's point. What are your thoughts about the idea of dying out here? Naruto asked. Hinata thought for a moment before answering the sensitive question. I would much rather survive. I have a clan to lead. I'm not the head yet, but I will be once I turn 18. I would rather not leave my clan's line splintered. Beyond your dislike of having responsibility forced upon you, what do you think of the prospect of dying on this mission? She said. The blonde laughed a bit, his voice suddenly a bit more melancholy. I would rather die out here than in my own apartment. Or out in the street for that matter. I want my death to mean something, you know? He said. Hinata furrowed her eyebrows. You speak as though such a death is likely, she said, her voice containing the subtlest hint of concern. The blonde glanced up from the fire and looked her in the eyes. You really haven't pieced it together, have you? The villagers do a whole lot more than just glare at me, Hinata, he said bluntly. The hyuga heiress felt her stomach churn at what he was suggesting. There have been attempts on your life, Uzumaki-san? When? She asked. Naruto nodded and pulled his kunai out of the ground. Yup. They take a swing at it once every few months. Usually in October. They haven't succeeded yet, obviously, but who knows? Maybe they'll catch me off guard one of these times, he said. Hinata stared at the genin wide-eyed. How can you speak of such things so easily? Does your own life really mean that little to you? She asked quietly. The blonde gave her a pained smile. When you've been told that you're a wretch your whole life, that you aren't worth anybody's time, you start to believe it after a little while. I've found ways to keep myself motivated, but that motivation slips every once in a while. And when it does, I end up in a dark place, he said honestly, his hands trembling slightly from both exhaustion and emotion. The hyuga girl felt a wave of guilt wash over her as she recalled her words to Naruto on the Hokage building roof. She studied her teammate, who was clearly doing his best to stay calm, for several moments before broaching an incredibly risky topic. Have you ever become suicidal, Uzumaki-san? She asked carefully. The genin tensed at the question, but quickly relaxed. Only once, and I promised myself never let myself fall that far again. Suicide is giving up, and I hate giving up more than just about anything, he said firmly. Hinata nodded. To her own surprise, she found that his words brought her a degree of relief. She then stood up from her spot by the fire and began making her way back toward her tent. Thank you for the talk, Uzumaki-san. I am now sufficiently tired enough to sleep, she said gratefully as she opened the flap of her tent. Before she could fully enter, Naruto spoke once more. Night, Hinata, he called quietly. The hyuga girl remained silent for several moments before smiling to herself and slipping inside her tent. Good night, Uzumaki-san. Chapter 6. A Creeping Mist. Naruto yawned as he and the rest of his team trekked on towards an oncoming body of water. They had awoken at the crack of dawn to continue their journey to the land of waves, and they were nearly there. The body of water they were about to cross represented the natural border between nations. There should be a boat up ahead. It'll be a tight fit, but we should be able to make it in one trip, Tazuna said as they reached the beach. As the old man had predicted, there was a transfer boat awaiting them at the bank. The party made their way to the boat and piled in. Tazuna had also been right when he had said that it would be a tight fit, as there was little, if any, space. This sucks, Naruto complained as he and Hinata were crushed into a corner. Shikamaru wasn't faring much better, as he was more or less stuck underneath Kakashi. As they crossed the water, the boat rocked and swayed, causing each ninja to readjust the distribution of their weight in order to prevent the boat from tipping. During one particularly extreme shift, Hinata's face was slammed into Naruto's, causing her forehead to hit his cheekbone. Ow! Naruto groaned as the hyuga girl fought against gravity to prevent herself from falling on the blonde completely. After several tense moments, the boat re-steadied itself, allowing Hinata to scoot several inches away from Naruto. I didn't mean to headbutt you. I'm sorry, she apologized. The blonde raised an eyebrow and shook his head. It's fine. I just wish you didn't have such a hard head, he replied. The hyuga heiress glared at him, but calmed herself. If only you weren't so physically fragile, then the density of my skull wouldn't be an issue, she countered, her tone uncharacteristically teasing. Naruto grinned and poked her on the forehead, causing her to flinch. From the looks of it, you got bruised worse than me. If anybody's fragile, it's you, Hinata, he said. The hyuga heiress responded by poking him in the ribs, infusing a bit of chakra into them. The excitable genin yelped as his body was jolted with foreign energy. He rubbed his ribcage and glanced up at Hinata, who was covering her mouth and giggling. "Forgive me for laughing, but that was quite funny," she said through her laughs. Naruto chuckled and settled back into place as the boat approached the land of waves. "I didn't know you were even capable of laughing, so I guess I don't mind," he replied. The Hyuga girl frowned and looked out over the water before looking back to Naruto. "Of course I can laugh. I simply have standards when it comes to humor, unlike you," she retorted haughtily. The blonde sighed heavily. "Right back to being a bitch. Go figure," he thought to himself as the boat entered a swath of thick mist. Kakashi, who had been watching Naruto and Hinata bicker with great amusement, frowned at the arrival of the fog. "This mist isn't natural. Be on guard," he warned his team. The genin all nodded and alerted themselves. The boat soon reached land, prompting Team 7 and Tazuna to tentatively exit. Once they were fully grounded, they began to walk straight ahead. For several moments, there was peace. That peace was shattered when an enormous butcher's knife came flying through the air, barely missing decapitating Shikamaru. "We have company. Surround Tazuna and don't move," Kakashi ordered. The genin did as they were told and formed a defensive triangle around the bridge builder. Hinata activated her Byakugan and surveyed the area around them. She gasped and looked to Kakashi. 2 o'clock, Kakashi-sensei!" she yelled. The jonin immediately jumped straight up, barely avoiding bisection by the same large knife that had flown past them moments beforehand. Kakashi then threw a kunai in a seemingly random direction. The small projectile was then audibly deflected, giving the silver-haired ninja all the information he needed to determine his adversary's location. Kakashi weaved several hand seals and reared his head back. The genin suddenly felt the air temperature shift as their sensei prepared a jutsu. "Fire-style, fireball jutsu!" the jonin yelled. A blast of orange flames erupted from his mouth and traveled east, clearing away much of the mist and igniting the ground. The figure that was revealed was horrifying. It was a man, and he was nothing short of appalling. He was tall, had serrated teeth, and wielded the enormous knife that had been terrorizing Team 7. "Well, this is unexpected. Of all the people I expected to encounter on this mission, you weren't one of them," Zabuza Momochi Kakashi said. The man grinned underneath the bandages that covered the lower half of his face. "So you know my name. I see that my reputation precedes me." "I'm flattered," he said in a raspy, malicious voice. He then charged forward and swung his blade at the jonin, who produced a pair of kunai and blocked the strike. Sparks flew in all directions as the ninja clashed. Zabuza glanced at Naruto, Hinata, and Shikamaru as he strained against Kakashi. "I see you brought children for me. How thoughtful of you, Kakashi the copy ninja," he said sadistically. He then kicked the silver-haired ninja in the chest and charged the genin. He swung his blade in a downward arc at them. All three combined their kunai and physical strength in order to block the strike. Despite the combined effort, the impact forced both Hinata and Shikamaru to their knees, leaving Naruto momentarily alone to defend himself. "Seems like you've got the most horsepower of your group. Take that to the bank, kid. Because it's all you've got to be happy about right now," Zabuza said with a smirk. He then kicked the blonde underneath his chin, sending him flying backwards. Naruto crashed to the ground 20 feet away with a trail of blood dripping from his mouth due to a split lip. The mist ninja leapt into the air and raised his blade, preparing to cut the boy in half. Before he could bring his sword down on Naruto, Kakashi appeared between them and caught it between his palms. "Your fight is with me, Zabuza. Keep them out of this," he warned. He pried the blade from the man's hands and tossed it up in the air. He then slammed a punch into the right side of Zabuza's jaw, causing him to take 3 steps back. The jonin reached up and caught the man's sword, which he had tossed into the air. He pointed its tip at Zabuza and slowly reached to remove his forehead protector from his left eye. Zabuza scowled and made a hand seal. 2 copies of himself then appeared on either side of him. He grinned and looked back to Naruto, who had returned to Tazuna and his teammates. "I think it's only fair that the brats get a workout too. Don't you agree, Kakashi?" he asked rhetorically. He then sent his clones after the genin and charged Kakashi. Despite the warning they had been given by their sensei, the children were not prepared in the least for the battle that was to come. Hinata gritted her teeth as the water clones approached she and her teammates. They were at a monumental strength disadvantage, even against clones. She looked to Naruto, who was wiping blood from his lip. "Uzumaki-san, make clones, as many as you can. We don't have anything resembling the strength to face this man, so we're going to use numbers instead," she said. Shikamaru, having heard about Naruto's beating of Mizuki from his father, raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure you want him to do that? It might get a little crowded," he asked. Hinata frowned at this. "I'm sure we'll have plenty of space, Nara-san. Now, Uzumaki-san, she began. Before she could finish her sentence, the battlefield was absolutely swamped with Naruto clones. There you go. That's as many as I can crank out, the blonde said proudly. The Hyuga heiress's mouth hung open in shock as she activated her Byakugan to scan the area. T-2000 clones? How? How in God's name is that possible? She said, dumbfounded by Naruto's incredible feat of chakra reserves. Shikamaru patted her on the shoulder and chuckled. Not as dumb as you thought, Hinata? He asked humorously. Hinata shook her head and regained her bearings. Chapter 7, Ice Frozen, Ice Melted. Naruto wiped a bit of sweat from his brow as he stared up at the tree he had been climbing for the last 2 hours. Kakashi had sent Team 7 out into the nearby forest for a special form of training. As it turned out, it was possible to walk on vertical surfaces with the aid of one's chakra. By focusing said chakra into their feet, the genin could walk on nearly any surface, water included. Hinata was already capable of the technique, as she had been taught at a young age by her family. Shikamaru had not been taught, but he had grasped the technique incredibly quickly. Naruto, on the other hand, had not been so fortunate. His massive reserves of chakra made it immensely difficult to focus the correct amount of chakra into his feet. In most cases, he siphoned too much, which resulted in his launching from the tree. Here goes nothing, the blonde thought to himself as he took 2 unsteady steps up the side of the tree. To his surprise, this climbing of the tree went quite smoothly, with the genin reaching the second highest branch. He carefully latched onto the protrusion and made his way onto it. He looked down to the ground and chuckled nervously. He was nearly 70 feet from the forest floor, and a fall would be quite painful. Neji, from the look plastered on your face, heights aren't a favorite of yours, Neji. Naruto glanced to his left, where another tree was situated. Sitting on a branch at roughly the same height as the blonde was a fairly ambiguous-looking person. The person had long brown hair, somewhat feminine features, and the voice could have belonged to either gender. Before he could open his mouth, the stranger chuckled and spoke. Neji, before you trip over yourself any more than you already have, I'm a boy. You aren't the first to struggle with that distinction, Neji, he said with a humorous smile. Naruto nodded and leaned back against the tree. He's a guy, and he's even prettier than Hinata. Not something I thought would ever cross my mind, he thought to himself. The genin then furrowed his eyebrows and studied the boy. Neji, how are you up here exactly? Are you a ninja too, Neji, he asked skeptically. The feminine boy shook his head and tapped on the tree. Neji, nope. I'm just extremely good at climbing these. It's a hobby of mine. My name is Haku. By the way, Neji, he said. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the explanation, but chose not to press any further. Neji, mine's Naruto. Nice to meet you, Neji, he replied. The boys made small talk for several minutes before they were interrupted by Hinata, who had been searching for the blonde. Neji, there you are. Despite your general loudness, you're shockingly difficult to track down, Neji, the Hyuga girl said after landing on Naruto's branch. Neji, what do you need, Hinata? Is Zabuza back? Did Shikamaru finally overachieve? Neji, the blonde asked jokingly. At the name of the Mist Ninja, Haku momentarily tensed, but suppressed the reaction so quickly that neither genin was able to catch a glimpse of it. Hinata shook her head at the questions. Neji, no, none of those things have happened. If they had, you would have noticed. Even your senses aren't that dull, Neji, she said. The Hyuga girl then looked to Haku and frowned. Neji, who is this? Uzumaki-san? Neji, she asked curiously. Naruto grumbled at her first mark, but shrugged at the second. Neji, his name is Haku. I met him all of 10 minutes ago, Neji, he explained. Hinata did a double take at the masculine pronoun the blonde had used in reference to Haku, a look of obvious confusion on her face. After regaining her momentarily lost composure, the Hyuga heiress began to walk down the side of the tree. Neji, be back home in 15 minutes, Uzumaki-san. Dinner will be served then, Neji, she ordered as she descended the stump. After she was assuredly out of earshot, Haku sighed and gave Naruto a sympathetic look. Neji, she verbally abuses you, doesn't she, Neji, he asked. The blonde shook his head and chuckled to himself. Neji, not really. She just hates my guts. Most of what she says is about how much better than me she is. It's never really all that personal, save for a time or two, Neji, he replied. The feminine boy stared off in the direction Hinata had walked. Neji, despite the harshness of her tone, I still get the feeling that she harbors much more complex emotions regarding you. That rocky exterior is nothing but a front, Neji, he said. Naruto furrowed his eyebrows. Neji, no, I'm pretty sure her feelings regarding me are pretty simple. She hates things that she thinks are below her, and in one sense, I am below her. I did see her laugh once, though, So maybe she has a person buried underneath all of that snark, Neji, he said. Haku turned back to the blonde. Neji, the reason I say that she likely doesn't actually hate you is that she came to find you for dinner. If she truly detested you, she would have left you here to go hungry. She also seemed to be somewhat relieved by the fact that I wasn't here to threaten or harm you, Neji, he explained. Naruto considered his explanation for a moment before nodding. Neji, I guess that makes sense. I don't know why you being non-threatening to me would be a relief to her, but I've never been great at reading into that kind of thing, Neji, he said. Haku chuckled to himself. Clearly, he thought to himself. The boys talked for another 15 minutes before Naruto stood up to leave. Neji, Hinata will probably skewer me with a fork if I'm not at dinner, so I should get going, Neji, he said. Haku nodded and waved goodbye as the blonde maneuvered his way down the side of his tree. The boy sighed to himself sadly. Every friend I make becomes nothing more than a name in the obituaries. Hinata grunted with effort as she carried a box of building supplies across the half-finished bridge. Tazuna had brought Team 7 out to the unfinished structure in order to help with its construction. Their role was to move boxes and beams across and around the bridge, which was both tiring and incredibly mundane. Neji, how are you holding up, Hinata? Neji, the hyuga heiress glanced to her right and spotted Kakashi carrying a metal beam. He appeared to have not even broken a sweat despite the rigorous exercise. Hinata shrugged as best she could while she set down her box in its designated destination. Neji, this is somewhat tiring, but not unbearable. Quite boring, if you ask me, Neji, she replied. The Jonin nodded and returned to his work. The hyuga girl looked to the northern side of the bridge, where Naruto and Shikamaru were slaving away. Even Uzumaki-san is beginning to fatigue. This is just horrible. I would rather be forced to climb every tree in the forest than do grunt work, she thought to herself glumly. The genin continued to grind away for another 30 minutes. Nothing of note happened. No accidents, no drama, no great successes. Once those 30 minutes had passed, however, something interesting did happen. A heavy mist rolled over the bridge without warning, prompting Hinata to activate her Byakugan. The same tactic again. How peculiar, she thought as she looked to her team, who all nodded and began evacuating the various workers. After the builders had been cleared, save for Tazuna, who had demanded to stay behind, the genin all scampered to Kakashi to await directions. Neji, we're going to use more or less the same arrangement. I want the three of you to guard Tazuna. I'll handle Zabuza, Neji, the Jonin ordered. The children nodded and formed their defensive triangle around the bridge builder. Then they waited. For close to 5 minutes, there was silence. Eventually, a dark chuckle could be heard from within the mist. As it drew closer, the footsteps of not one, but 2 people could be heard. Neji, it sounds like he brought help. This could be trouble, Neji, the silver-haired ninja muttered under his breath. The 2 figures came into view moments later. One of them was clearly Zabuza, but the second figure was more than a bit shocking. Neji, that's the same hunter ninja from before. Just as I thought, Neji, Hinata said. The mist ninja and the hunter stopped advancing roughly 20 feet from Team 7. Neji, greetings, Kakashi. It's been a few days. I see you brought your brats again, Neji, Zabuza said with a dark grin. The Jonin drew a kunai, took a step forward. Neji, and this time, you won't be making any clones to bother them with. I'll make sure of that, Neji, he said threateningly. The mist ninja looked to the hunter and gestured to the genin. Neji, you deal with the children. They shouldn't require much effort to kill, Neji, he ordered. The hunter nodded and waved a hand in front of his face. Suddenly, he was wielding 3 needles made of ice. Neji, yes, Zabuza-sama, Neji, he said. He then charged at Naruto, Hinata, and Shikamaru. The blonde looked to Shikamaru. Neji, stay with Tazuna, Neji, he said. The shadow user nodded and drew a kunai to deflect an ice needle that had been launched at him. Naruto and Hinata then sprinted towards the hunter, meeting him in the middle of the bridge. The blonde threw a right-handed punch towards his opponent's head, a strike that the hunter easily leaned away from and countered with a stepping knee to Naruto's chest. He's fast as hell, the excitable genin thought as he stepped back to catch the wind that had been knocked out of him. He was then passed by Hinata, who engaged the hunter aggressively. She launched a combination of palm strikes to the ninja's body and head, landing 2 of them. As the exchange deepened, however, the hyuga girl was slowly overwhelmed by the speed of her foe. She was eventually knocked backwards by a hard punch to the center of her forehead. She was caught and steadied by Naruto before she could fall to her rear end. The pair both studied the enemy before them. After several seconds, Hinata looked to the blonde. Neji, we need to create a diversion. We don't have even half of the speed necessary to contend with him. Do you have any smoke bombs on you, Neji, she asked. Naruto nodded and reached into his tool pack. Neji, I am guessing you want me to throw it at him so you can attack him while he's blind, Neji, he asked. Hinata nodded and motioned for the blonde to enact the plan. The excitable genin rushed the hunter and hurled 2 smoke bombs at him, both of which burst at his feet. Hinata then rushed into the cloud of smoke. Due to his lack of a dojutsu, Naruto was forced to wait at the edge of the cloud as his teammate battled the hunter. After several moments of tense, unviewable combat, the Hyuga heiress came flying out of the smoke. She crashed into Naruto, knocking him to the ground. Neji, could you not get launched during one of these fights? I'm getting sick of being your landing pad, Neji, Naruto groaned as Hinata got up from on top of him. She chuckled to herself and assumed her stance. Neji, my father ordered you to protect me, didn't he? While I entirely detest his choice in bodyguard, you do make a good Kushinaji, she replied. The blonde growled and stood up. Neji, glad I could be of some use to you, Queen Hyuga. We're best friends now, right? Neji, he asked sarcastically. Before they could start bickering, the hunter emerged from the smoke and kicked them backwards several feet. Neji, you argue like a married couple on the verge of an ugly divorce in the middle of battle. You really should be paying better attention, Neji, he said. The hunter then gestured to the puddle of water at their feet. Neji, why do you think Zabuza-sama used the mist again? He knows as well as you do that the same tactic would never work twice. He used it to assist Neji, he said. The pair both flinched as the water supercooled and froze. It then rose from the ground and swirled around them for several moments. Neji, demonic ice mirrors, Neji, the hunter yelled. The water formed into a dozen or so icy mirrors in a dome-like formation around the genin at his command. The hunter then sunk into one of them, much to the confusion of Naruto and Hinata. Neji, be warned, none have survived this technique. You will die here today, whether you wish to or not, Neji, he called from within the ice. Before the children could react, a volley of frozen needles came flying at them from all directions. By the time the storm was finished, both genin were covered in small cuts and puncture wounds. Neji, I couldn't even see them. Even with my Byakuga, the Hyuga girl said, her tone brittle with shock. The blonde clenched his jaw and created several shadow clones. Neji, we need to break those mirrors, Neji, he said. He then sent his clones to strike the icy mirrors. Before they could make contact with them, they were shredded to bits by a wave of needles. The hunter's outline then appeared in several of the mirrors at once. Neji, you cannot touch the mirrors. Even if you did, they are nearly indestructible. Give up. Death will be painless if you do, Neji, he said. The pair both growled in defiance and continued make rushes for the mirrors, being repelled each time. After several minutes of failure, the Hyuga girl came to a realization. Neji, he is moving from mirror to mirror at an absolutely blinding speed. We have to intercept him somehow, Neji, she said through gritted teeth. Naruto took a deep breath and pulled a needle out of his arm. Neji, how do we do that though? Even your eyes can't track him, Neji, he pointed out. The Hyuga heiress responded by sidestepping a trio of needles. Neji, there's a pattern to the way he moves and where he moves to. It's subtle, but timeable. For every 5th flurry of needles, he moves 1 mirror to the left, or he crosses to the opposite side, Neji, she explained in a hushed tone. The blonde nodded and turned his attention back to the hunter. Neji, we're going to survive you, Haku. We'll do more than that, actually. We're going to bring you down, Neji, he assured. The hunter visibly tensed. Neji, so you knew, Neji, he asked. Naruto nodded and assumed a taijutsu stance as he prepared to evade a storm of needles. Neji, I recognized your voice. I think Hinata did too. I would ask you why you're trying to kill us, but it's pretty clear that you only interacted with us to gain information, Neji, he said, a hint of pain in his voice. Haku went silent for a moment before disappearing from the mirror he had been occupying. He reappeared directly in front of Naruto and punched him across the left side of his jaw, sending him to his rear end before retreating back into a slab of reflective ice. Neji, keep your personal feelings out of this, Naruto-san. It will make things much more difficult for both you and I if you don't, Neji, the hunter warned. The genin then re-engaged Haku, managing to make contact with him as he flew by on several occasions, but never inflicting damage. Finally, during one specific exchange, Hinata was able to kick Haku out of the air, sending him to the ground roughly 10 feet from herself and Naruto. Neji, those eyes of yours are a nuisance. I think I'll aim for them next time, Neji, Haku growled as he stood to his feet and entered an ice mirror. The hunter then began to erratically change his position, flying from mirror to mirror in a seemingly random and nonsensical pattern. I won't be able to dodge. I need to protect my eyes, Hinata thought frantically. She threw up her hands to cover her face as Haku prepared to launch a flurry of needles. The hunter noticed that she had left her neck exposed during her efforts to avoid ocular injury, and adjusted his aim. Neji checkmate. Hinata-sanaji, he whispered from the mirror directly behind the Hyuga girl. Hinata reflexively whipped around to face him, exposing her neck further. Haku then launched an absolute maelstrom of needles in her direction. Hinata squeezed her eyes shut as she awaited the sting of the puncture wounds. The sting never came. Kakashi gritted his teeth as he avoided a swing of Zabuza's blade. He and the Mist Ninja had been fighting for roughly 10 minutes, and it had been anything but easy. They were nearly even. Neji, Yuri, a slippery one, Kakashi. Tough to pin down, Neji, Zabuza said as he continued to attack the silver-hair ninja. Kakashi stepped to the left to avoid a thrust of the man's sword, pivoting off to his left as he did so. The Jonin then slammed a left-handed punch into the right side of Zabuza's jaw, spinning his head around and causing him to stumble back. As the Sharingan ninja moved in to follow up on his successful counter, who was struck by the flat of the Mist Ninja's blade, launching him back nearly 20 feet. Kakashi landed on his feet and regained his footing. He glared at Zabuza and prepared to attack once more, but stopped when he noticed that the Mist Ninja was staring off to his left with a look of amusement on his face. Neji, it looks like Haku has 2 of your brats locked up. I'm sorry to say, but they're more or less dead in the water now, Neji, he said, turning his gaze back to the Jonin. Kakashi glanced in the direction Zabuza had been looking and clenched his jaw. Naruto and Hinata were confined with what appeared to be a dome of mirrors made of ice. He took a deep breath and charged the Mist Ninja again, this time leading with a kick to the right side of the man's ribcage. The kick landed square to Zabuza's floating ribs, causing him to double over. The Jonin built on his success by grabbing him by the neck and flinging him back several meters. I have to end this soon. They won't last long in that dome of ice. Hang on, you 2-foot. Hinata's eyes slowly opened as she realized that she was, in fact, alive. Even more interesting was the fact that she wasn't in any more pain than she had been previously. She glanced up from the ground, which she had looked to in fear when Haku's needles had been launched. What she saw made her blood run cold. Naruto had thrown himself in front of her in order to shield her from the storm of icy needles, which explained why the Hyuga girl was more or less fine physically. Neji, Uzumaki-san? Neji, she said quietly. Naruto glanced over his shoulder at the girl and gave her a strange smile. His body was riddled with needles, nearly 50 in total. Neji, what's with the look? You look like you just saw a ghost, Neji, he said humorously. His knees then gave out, causing him to fall backward. Hinata snapped out of her daze and caught him just before he could hit the ground. Neji, why? Why would you do something so stupid and reckless? Neji, she demanded as she cradled his head. The blonde tried to shrug, but coughed painfully as a result, spilling a bit of blood from his mouth. Neji, I've still got a promise to keep. I told your father I'd keep you safe. Besides, it's better that I die here instead of you. You're important, Hinata. I'm not. Neji, he said honestly. The Hyuga girl felt her chest tighten. Neji, but you're a member of this team, and we need you to function properly. We need you, Uzumaki-san, she reasoned quietly. Naruto shook his head and chuckled. Neji, look on the bright side. You've been saying this whole time that you'd rather be on a different team. It isn't a full switch, but you won't have to put up with me anymore. Neji, he said. The Hyuga girl felt her eyes become wet at his words. Guilt was taking hold of her, and she was being overwhelmed. Neji, I jumped to conclusions too quickly. I'm satisfied with my team. You and Nara-san have been reliable and brave throughout this mission. I don't want this cell to be splintered, Neji, she said tensely. Naruto smiled. Neji, well, I'm glad you're warming up to us. I tried hard to make you see that we were worthy of being your teammates. Honestly, that was my goal from day one. Neji, he said. Hinata's eyes finally overflowed, sending tears dripping down her face. Neji, I was foolish enough to think you weren't. I was wrong. Completely and utterly, Neji, she said tearfully. The blonde reached up and wiped a tear from her face, causing her to clench her jaw to prevent sobbing. Neji, I didn't think anybody would cry for me when I died. Thank you for that, Hinata. Thank you so much, Neji, the blonde said gratefully. The Hyuga heiress took hold of the hand he had used to wipe away her tears with her free hand and squeezed it as she sobbed. Neji, please, save your strength. Stop talking, Uzumaki-san, she pleaded. Naruto sighed heavily as his eyes dulled slightly. Neji, I know this may not mean much coming from me, but I've always thought you were really pretty. In a regal sort of way, Neji, he said. Hinata broke down further at his words. Neji, stop being so kind to me. I treated you like garbage. I should be the one bleeding on the ground, not you, Neji, she cried. The dying genin smiled sadly. Neji, you say that like you were the only one. I've dealt with worse. My apartment gets trashed every other week, and I've been mugged more than once. You're so much better than those people. Don't be so hard on yourself. Neji, he said reassuringly. The Hyuga girl gathered enough composure to ask one simple question that had been burning in her mind. Neji, why? What did you do to deserve such persecution? Neji, she asked shakily. Naruto used the last of his strength to lift up his shirt, revealing the seal Hinata had seen with her Byakugan. Neji, because I'm a monster. Neji, he said simply. The light then left his eyes completely, prompting his body to go limp in Hinata's arms. The Hyuga heiress shook him gently in a desperate, feeble attempt to wake him. Neji, Uzumaki-san? Stay with me, please. Tell me what you meant by what you just said. Neji, she begged quietly. When he didn't respond, she shook him harder. Neji, wake up, Uzumaki-san. Please don't go to sleep. Damn it, answer me when I'm talking to you, Neji, she sobbed. Instead of shaking him again, she hugged his body tightly and buried her face in the crook of his neck. Neji, who do you think you are? Just as I was starting to care about you, you die and leave me alone again. Why? Don't my feelings mean anything to you? Neji, she demanded through sobs. She then pulled her head from his neck and gazed at his tranquil, lifeless face. Hinata then planted a soft kiss on his forehead and pulled his head into her chest. Neji, Naruto, Neji, she whimpered, her tear ducts exhausted and her throat raw from the weeping. She gently laid his body down and silently paid her respects before turning to face the mirrors, where Haku had watched the scene from. Neji, come out, Haku-san. Your fight is with me now, Neji.